The mortar rounds were getting closer. Sergeant Janet Reed pressed her face against the concrete wall of what used to be a school, feeling the vibrations of each explosion crawl up her spine like insects. 60 meters, then 40, now 20. The enemy had their range, and they knew it. Command, this is Reaper 6, requesting immediate extraction. We are taking sustained fire, over. She kept her voice steady, professional, even as dust rained down from the ceiling and Private Patel's hands shook while reloading his rifle. Static. Command, do you copy? Reaper 6 requesting. They're not coming, Corporal James Cruz said flatly. He was staring at his tactical tablet, the screen casting harsh shadows across his face. Look at this. Janet crawled across broken glass to his position. The tablet showed real-time satellite tracking, their eyes in the sky supposedly. Except the feed wasn't showing their position in this bombed-out village 20 clicks from the Syrian border. It was showing downtown Aleppo, where Task Force Griffin, Colonel Webb's hand-picked team of West Point graduates and Special Operations veterans, was conducting a high-value target extraction. The official mission, the one with air support, armor backup, and media coverage. Jesus Christ, whispered Staff Sergeant Aisha Williams, the team medic. We're not even on the map. Another explosion, this one close enough that chunks of ceiling crashed down. Specialist Neil Webb, no relation to the colonel, though he'd spent 3 years trying to prove himself worthy of the name, let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. My cousin's on Griffin, he said almost conversationally. Tyler Webb, the colonel's actual nephew. They're probably drinking beer in a secured perimeter right now while we complete the actual fucking mission, Janet finished. She looked at the intelligence folder they'd risked everything to retrieve from the dead drop. Top secret, eyes only. The kind of intel that could prevent a chemical weapons attack that would kill thousands. Or so they'd been told. Patel, the squad's intelligence specialist and the only one who could read the classified documents, had gone pale an hour ago when he'd opened the folder. He hadn't said what was inside, just kept muttering about plausible deniability and black site locations. Patel, Janet said sharply, what's in the folder? He looked at her with eyes older than his 23 years. Colonel Webb's name, on transfer orders for prisoners to facilities that don't officially exist. Dates that match up with human rights violations that sparked the riots 6 months ago. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't an intelligence retrieval, it was evidence disposal. Webb had sent them to get killed retrieving documents that would destroy his career if they ever reached proper channels. And Task Force Griffin's high-value extraction, probably a staged operation to distract from the real mission, the one where Webb's expendable squad was supposed to die quietly in a village that didn't exist on any official map. He sent us to bury his war crimes, Cruz said, his voice hollow, and die doing it. The radio crackled to life, not command, a different frequency. Reaper 6, this is actual command, General Patricia Morrison, CENTCOM. We have intercepted your distress calls. Be advised, Colonel Webb has been placed under investigation. However, we cannot officially acknowledge your mission exists. You are not on our operational roster. Janet felt ice in her veins. Then how do we get out? A pause that stretched like a held breath. You don't. Complete the mission or abort. Either way, this conversation never happened. Morrison out. The line went dead. Williams started laughing. The kind of laugh that comes right before someone breaks completely. We're ghosts. Whether we live or die, we were never here. Neil Webb was staring at his rifle like he'd never seen one before. My whole career, trying to prove I belonged, and he sent me here to die because I have the wrong skin color and the right last name. Can't have people thinking diversity works. Focus, Janet snapped, though her own thoughts were spiraling. They could abort, destroy the evidence, fade into the civilian population, disappear. Webb would get away with it, but they'd survive. Or they could complete the mission, get the evidence to someone who could use it, expose Webb and stop future atrocities. But Patel had found something else in the folder. Drone strike coordinates. Current, authorized, targeting the very village where they were hiding. If they left now, the strike would hit an empty building. If they stayed to fight their way out with the evidence, the drone would kill them all, along with any chance of justice. And there was a third option, one that made Janet's stomach turn. The enemy fighters surrounding them weren't random militia. According to the intel, they were the same group that had captured and killed the prisoners Webb had ordered tortured. They were here because someone, probably Webb, had leaked Reaper 6's position as a final cleanup operation. If Janet's squad surrendered, gave themselves and the evidence to the enemy, those torture victims would get justice, but American soldiers would be paraded as prisoners, maybe executed on camera, and the propaganda value would be incalculable. 3 choices. All impossible, all with consequences that rippled far beyond this moment. Cruz was looking at her, waiting for orders. Williams had her medical kit open, already triaging for the casualties she knew were coming. Patel held the folder like it was burning his hands. Neil Webb, young, broken, realizing his entire identity had been a lie, had his finger on the trigger, waiting. Outside, the enemy was closing in. Above, a drone circled, waiting for authorization. And somewhere safe, Colonel Webb was probably sleeping soundly, confident his problems were about to be eliminated. "Squad leaders," Janet said quietly, "I need options, and I need to know. Whatever we choose, can you live with it?" Because she was beginning to understand something terrible. Surviving this mission might be easier than living with how they survived it. "We split up," Janet said finally. The words tasted like ash. Cruz's head snapped up. "What?" "Patel and I take the evidence. Williams, Neil, and Cruz. You 3 create a diversion, make it look like we're trying to break north toward the Turkish border. The enemy follows you. The drone follows you. Patel and I slip south with the intel." "That's suicide for us," Williams said flatly. "You're asking us to be bait. I'm asking you to save thousands of lives. This intel stops Webb and prevents a chemical attack, but only if someone survives to deliver it." Neil Webb laughed bitterly. "So you're doing exactly what the colonel did. Deciding who's expendable." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Janet wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. She was making the same calculation. Whose lives mattered more, whose deaths served the greater good. "I'll go," Patel said quietly. "You need someone who can authenticate the documents. But Sergeant, pick someone else. Don't make this the same thing." Janet looked at her squad. Cruz had a wife and 2 kids in Georgia. Williams was 3 months from completing her medical degree through the Army. Neil was 22, still trying to figure out who he was beyond his last name. And herself? Janet Reed, daughter of immigrants, first in her family to serve. Everything to prove, nothing to lose except her life and soul. The drone's engine grew louder overhead. "New plan," Janet said. "We all go south. Together. We fight our way through or we die together. No one gets left behind." "That's tactically insane," Cruz protested. "Our chances drop to—" "I don't care about chances. I care about not becoming Colonel Webb." They moved out at 0300, using the darkness and smoke from fires as cover. The enemy had expected them to run north, toward safety, toward backup that wasn't coming. Going south meant heading deeper into hostile territory, toward the one place no one would expect, directly into the enemy stronghold. It was Patel who spotted it first. "Sergeant, that village 3 clicks south, the one showing massive heat signatures on infrared." "That's enemy central command," Neil said, checking his tactical display. "Exactly," Janet replied, "the last place they'd expect us to hide the evidence." What she didn't say, it was also where the chemical weapons were supposedly stored. If they could get the evidence there, plant it where international observers would find it during the inevitable investigation after the attack. But that meant letting the attack happen, letting people die to expose Webb's crimes. They were 2 clicks out when Williams spotted the shepherd, an old man with a flock of goats, completely oblivious to the war zone around him. In the darkness, he hadn't seen them yet. "He'll give away our position," Cruz whispered, weapon raised. "Stand down," Janet ordered. "Sergeant, he's heading straight for enemy patrol." The second they question him, "I said stand down." The old man passed within 50 meters, humming softly to his animals. Neil's hands shook on his rifle. 1 shot, 1 dead shepherd, their position secure. Janet let him pass. 15 minutes later, enemy fighters flooded their previous position. The shepherd had indeed talked, but Janet's squad was already gone, using the distraction to reach the village perimeter. "You let him live," Cruz said, not quite accusatory. "Yeah. That shepherd's information just got the enemy backup patrol killed in friendly fire. They thought we were still at the school." Janet's stomach turned. Mercy for one man had caused the deaths of others. The math of war was always cruel, but she'd never felt it so personally before. They planted the evidence in a warehouse basement, alongside what Patel identified as precursor chemicals for nerve agents. Then they radioed the coordinates anonymously to international observers, Syrian opposition forces, even Russian command. Everyone would find it. Everyone would investigate. Webb would be exposed, but they had to survive long enough for it to matter. Extraction came at dawn, not from command, but from a Turkish special forces unit that happened to be in the area for unrelated operations. A favor called in by someone unnamed at CENTCOM. They were debriefed in a black site that didn't exist, by officers with no names and no insignia. "The evidence has been authenticated," the lead interrogator said. "Colonel Webb is being arrested as we speak. You've prevented multiple war crimes and stopped a chemical attack." "At what cost?" Janet asked. The interrogator's expression didn't change. "That's classified." But Patel had hacked the mission reports during the flight back. The numbers made him physically ill. The enemy backup patrol, 23 dead from friendly fire. The shepherd, executed by his own people for providing false information. The village they'd used, evacuated by enemy forces, then destroyed by Allied airstrikes, thinking it was abandoned. 47 civilians killed in the crossfire during their escape that they never saw. And Task Force Griffin's successful mission? A PR stunt that rescued a defector who turned out to be a double agent. He'd already leaked classified intel that got an entire CIA network rolled up in Damascus, 16 agents dead. But Griffin got medals because they completed their mission. Webb was arrested, the war crimes stopped, the chemical attack was prevented. But the cost? 6 months later, Janet Reed stood at Arlington National Cemetery watching them bury Neil Webb. Not killed in action, the official report said training accident. But they all knew. He'd eaten his service pistol 3 days after they got back. His suicide note was one line: "I became what I hated." Cruz had requested transfer to a desk job. Couldn't pull a trigger anymore without seeing that shepherd's face. Williams finished medical school but refused her commission. Saved lives in Detroit instead, as far from the military as she could get. Patel worked at the Pentagon now, in intelligence oversight, making sure people like Webb never happened again. But he'd told Janet once, late and drunk, "We stopped him, but how many others are out there? How many squads are being sent to die right now?" Janet herself had been promoted to lieutenant, given a commendation for exceptional service under extreme conditions. They wanted her to recruit, to be the face of diversity in the military. Instead, she requested assignment to the Casualty Notification Office. Spent her days telling families their loved ones were dead. Penance, maybe, or just the only honest job left in the system. The final twist came in an unmarked envelope delivered to her quarters. Inside, a single document. Declassified years too early, probably leaked by someone at CENTCOM with a conscience. It was the real reason for their mission. Webb's war crimes were real, yes, but they were also convenient cover for something else. The chemical weapons they'd found weren't Syrian. They were American, from a black program so illegal it made Webb's torture look like jaywalking. Their mission had been to expose Webb while simultaneously ensuring the real evidence, American chemical weapons in a Syrian warehouse, would be destroyed in the resulting investigation. They'd been pawns in a game so deep they'd never even seen the board. Janet's phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was brief. New mission available. Another squad needs exposure. Another war criminal needs stopping. Another impossible choice needs making. Interested? She stared at the message for a long time. The truth was, they'd succeeded. Webb was in prison. The war crimes stopped. The chemical attack prevented. They'd saved thousands of lives. But Neil was dead. Cruz was broken. Williams had abandoned everything she'd worked for. Patel saw conspiracies everywhere because some of them were real. And Janet, Janet had become someone who could calculate that one dead shepherd was worth dozens of enemy fighters. That 47 civilian casualties was acceptable if it stopped hundreds more. That Neil's suicide was unfortunate, but statistically inevitable given what they'd experienced. She'd become competent at the math of acceptable losses, just like Colonel Webb. Her finger hovered over the reply button. One word would start the cycle again. Another squad, another mission, another set of impossible choices that would save some lives while destroying others. The phone screen showed her reflection, tired eyes, premature grey in her hair, the look of someone who'd seen too much and understood too little. Outside her window, Arlington stretched in perfect rows. All those lives spent in service, all those calculations about who was expendable and who wasn't. Janet typed one word, no, then deleted it and typed, yes, then deleted that too. The cursor blinked in the empty message field like a heartbeat, like a pulse on a battlefield, like the sound of a trigger waiting to be pulled. She thought about Neil, about Cruz, about Williams, about Patel, about the shepherd and the patrol and the 47 civilians whose names she'd memorized from the casualty reports, about Colonel Webb in his cell, probably sleeping soundly, convinced his only crime was getting caught. The worst part wasn't choosing. The worst part was knowing that whatever she chose, yes or no, action or inaction, engagement or withdrawal, someone would pay the price. The system didn't care about your morals, it only cared whether you were willing to make the calculation. And Janet Reed, daughter of immigrants, first in her family to serve, had learned to count bodies with the efficiency of a mathematician and the precision of a surgeon. She pressed send on an empty message. The cursor blinked once, twice, then the phone screen went dark. Some questions didn't deserve answers, some missions couldn't be declined, some choices destroyed you, whether you made them or not. And somewhere another squad was being loaded onto a transport, heading toward another impossible mission, sent by another colonel who'd already decided they were expendable. The cycle continued, the math remained unchanged, and Janet Reed went back to work, notifying the next family that their loved one had died, serving a system that had never valued them as anything more than acceptable losses in someone else's calculation. If this story moved you, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful tales from Talestily.